We're going to talk about installing VirtualBox and creating VMs, and then we're going to move on to other more complicated aspects. Now, VirtualBox is a lot like VMware Workstation and Hyper-V. The look and feel is a little bit different. You will have to get used to it. Um, Hyper-V and VMware Workstation are closer to each other in look and feel than VMware VirtualBox. Oracle VirtualBox is to either of them. But the good news is it's really easy to do. You download the file from virtualbox.org. You run it. You will need administrative privileges, as with most things these days, because the UAC has become useful. Um, and so, of course, installing the software is the sort of thing you shouldn't do without admin privileges. It's free. It's easy to use. It's available for uh, for Windows XP coming forward. If you're still using Windows XP or Vista, kick them to the curb, please. You should be using Windows 8.1, 8, or actually strike that, 8 or 8.1 or 10, preferably 10. You can also do this with Mac OS X or Linux. Um, on a Linux box, you can use your package management system to find VirtualBox 6.1 and installing that way. Because I'm actually looking at the virtualbox.org site right now on another device, and the package name is literally VirtualBox-6.1. So it's really easy. If you can't find it, just do a little research or go into the graphical form of your package management system, the software store, or DNF Dragora, or Synaptic, or Aptitude even really. Any package management system which will allow you to find and also install your software. I think the same thing is also true for newer distros that use things like Flatpak. Long story short, you can find it. And it will run nearly any VM you throw at it. All versions of Windows, as long as you have the key, Linux, BSD, the whole 9 yards. Now, after you install VirtualBox, you're going to want to use it. A hypervisor with no virtual machines to hypervise is really kind of pointless. So what you're going to do is create a VM or a VM environment for every one of the guest operating systems you want to use. There's a little bit of a terminological confusion here. Technically speaking, in these terms, the VMs you build, the individual guest systems, will be VM environments, whereas the raw copy would be the guest OS. But when you hear the term guest machine, VM, guest system, guest OS, all of that means a virtual machine. You can do this by using the Create Virtual Machine wizard. It'll walk you through a lot of the really easy steps. Click the new toolbar icon on the machine menu in the VirtualBox Manager. Choose New, and it will spin the process up. It'll have you decide how much RAM you want. It will recommend the kind of RAM. Now, when you do this, it'll start asking you questions, as it were, about what you are trying to accomplish. What kind, is it Linux? Is it Windows? Is it Mac OS? Is it BSD? What version? And it's going to come to some conclusions about how much RAM you might want. But you're not stuck with that. For example, if you give it, say you're going with a non-standard Linux distro, say an older kernel, some random flavor of Linux that you like, using some flavor of the 4.x kernel. We're up to 5.x now. And it might decide, hey, you only need 3/4 of a gig of RAM. If you know you need more, you can change that. So don't just click through willy-nilly unless you have a really good reason for doing so, because it might give you just enough RAM to be useless, particularly in the case of Windows. If it only gives you a gig of RAM, at least kick that up to 2. If it gives you 2, take 4. Particularly, I mean, of course, assuming of course that your system can support that. We'll talk about things like overcommitment later. So then we're going to create the hard disk. You've got three options here. Either you don't add a hard disk at all, or you create a hard disk while you're creating the system, or you use an existing disk. Say, for example, you have a VM that was working, something goes wrong. The virtual hard disk is okay, but the rest of the settings are kind of screwy. What you could do is create a new virtual machine, point it at the old hard drive, and go from there. It kind of looks like this. It'll recommend a disk size for you. You may have to jump through some hoops to change this, but you can either do not add a disk. Honestly, if you don't add a disk, you should have a pretty good reason for doing that. Create one now. This is the best option for a new virtual machine, or use an existing disk, say if you've moved one or copied one or something like that, and then you can use this file browser, which will become available when you activate it when you're good and ready. We'll talk next about actually creating these virtual hard disk files and some of the nomenclature we'll use. These three types of VMs have different acronyms for the same thing, whether it's either a virtual desktop image or a virtual hard drive or a VMDK. We'll get to that. I'll be right back. Thank you for watching.